Yet another edition of the Cyhawk series. The 2025 football game will take place in Jack Trice Stadium this coming Saturday. And I've got all you need to know about Iowa's opponent in week 2, the Cyclones, who are 2-0 heading into the big in-state rivalry. But first, before we get to the content, a big thank you to our sponsors, one being Jeff Knight and this awesome foundation in central Iowa. It's Maya's Spark of Courage. This young dog continues to inspire young kids at the Children's Hospital in Iowa City, visiting kids on a regular basis. You can read all about her. This book was written by Jeff Knight, and it's all about Maya. They give this book to patients there at the Children's Hospital, continues to inspire and build courage in those young, brave kids over at the Stead Family Children's Hospital. Visit MayaTheMalamute.com. Get your copy. Buy as many as you can for your favorite friends, family of any age. MayaTheMalamute.com, a story of courage. And of course, Under the Kitchen, Randy and his awesome prints. They were at Fry Fest here this past week, but also, of course, you can visit him online at underthekitchen.square.site. He's also got a Facebook page, so many ways to browse signed and unsigned prints available. We appreciate Under the Kitchen for being a part of our coverage here at From the Hawkeye of the Storm. So Iowa State this coming Saturday. The road team has dominated the series. In fact, the last time Iowa has lost in Jack Trice Stadium was in 2011. You got to go all the way back to the days of James Vandenberg to find history of that. Really quite amazing when you think about it. Iowa has won 6 straight in Ames, and it's always a good environment. People can knock Jack Trice Stadium if they want. It's an awesome environment for Cyhawk. Big noon kickoff will be there this Saturday. It's attracted College game day in recent seasons, but Iowa has found a way through multiple lightning delays, a very hot game in 2021, Ashton Kutcher being on set in 2021, if you're into that kind of stuff. But this year, it's a story of a team in Iowa State that's red hot, win against Kansas State, win against a really solid program from the Missouri Valley, and an Iowa team with some questions still to answer. So what should we expect in this one? Well, of course, if you're watching this channel, you're likely an Iowa fan. So I'm going to give you a bit of a background as to what I'm watching for in this game, specifically there in Jack Trice Stadium from the Cyclones, and how Iowa should or could try to combat what Iowa State brings. So first of all, Kirk Ferentz alluded to it this week at his weekly press conference. Iowa, a couple of years ago, hit a big run with Jazz Patterson on a counter play. Iowa eventually won that game behind Jazz Patterson, Cade McNamara, Luke Lachey, etc. It was really the defense that locked down. But boy, getting that big play in the run game fairly early was huge. Of course, Iowa always opportunistic with turnovers, but especially against Iowa State. Sebastian Castro had a big pick in this game that led to points. Iowa is likely to be feast or famine. It's going to be a challenge for Iowa to nickel and dime the Cyclones to death. But could they hit a big play? Sure. Who that would be? Maybe it's Jazz Patterson again. Maybe it's Xavier Williams, who had a big game in week 1 against Albany. Or maybe it's Terrell Washington, a guy who's been described as a bit of a Swiss Army knife. Maybe he gets in the open field and makes things happen. I think he's potentially the most electric running back they have who's game ready. I know people love Nate McNeil, and I'm sure he's going to get there. I would not be shocked if he doesn't see the field Saturday. Now, he will likely travel, but I would doubt he sees the field much. If he does, good indications from the coaching staff. But I think they really like those top 3 guys right now without Kamari Moulton, who will miss this game. Feast or famine in the run game. If Iowa can knock off a big play or 2 on the ground, it bodes well for the Hawkeyes. Here's a question just about flow of the season, rhythm, momentum. Could you argue that maybe Iowa State is going into this game a bit content? Now, before you jump all over me for that take, let me explain. Iowa State's already got a big win overseas in Ireland against a rival, Farmageddon rival in Kansas State. Really solid win back home. They avoided a letdown against South Dakota. This game means nothing for Big 12 purposes. I know their goal is to win the Big 12 title so they can get to the college football playoff. They're likely not going to get into the playoff without winning a Big 12 title. It's funny that I'm kind of bringing this up because in the history of this rivalry, it's always been Iowa's big brother, Iowa State's little brother. This is always Iowa State's Super Bowl. People joke about that. And obviously they want to win. I'm not downplaying that. But I guess my point being is that for Iowa, it almost feels like they got a little bit more to prove right now. Even though Iowa State hasn't been able to beat the Hawks at home, this is an Iowa State team who is favored in this game. They'll have the pressure to win. And Iowa is looking to prove the doubters wrong, especially with the passing game, the struggles of Mark Gronowski in quarter 1 against Albany. you just wonder if maybe Iowa's a little hungrier than Iowa State in this game. It's one of those mentality, psyche type of storylines that I'll be following, and just seeing how these teams start out in the first quarter on Saturday. Each team's RPO is a storyline. Iowa State was really effective in the RPO game against Kansas State week 1. Iowa was fairly effective once they got it going in week 2, but again, we need to see more through the air from Gronowski. He certainly showcased his ability to ran for close to 50 yards. And based on what I've seen on tape from Iowa State against Kansas State and South Dakota, they are a team. I mean, we saw Avery Johnson week 1 run for a touchdown against Iowa State and get some solid yardage. Now, I think Avery Johnson's probably got a little bit better speed than Mark. He's not as tough of a quarterback, not as tough of a runner based on what I've seen, but I think Mark will find some space. And we talk about feast or famine. Maybe he knocks off a big run or two as a quarterback. Let's not forget 2015, C.J. Beathard's big couple of runs in that stadium to kind of make his mark, set his foot in the ground in Ames. Also in the K-State game, a couple of observations very early in that one. It's kind of funny. They had set off fireworks, and the commentators even commented how there was smoke in the air even early in the game in the first quarter. There was a muffed punt in the first quarter by Kansas State from a really electric return guy they have. And that was followed up by another horrendous mistake, this one by Rocco Becht on a horrible toss play. The point in me bringing up the smoke, the commentators even speculated that maybe that Kansas State return guy lost the ball in the smoke. That's how murky, that's how smoky it was in the air. It was also a rainy start, and that kept the scoring low. It was a defensive battle and plenty of turnovers early. But as I said, Rocco Becht had a horrendous toss to a back, and he's a guy who can make mistakes. I mean, he is a guy who at times will get a little bit interception happy and has had a propensity at times to be a little loose with the football. But boy, the guy's really good when he can stand in the pocket. And when he gets out of the pocket with his legs, he's dangerous as well. I mentioned the other day on my show with Mark Rogers, I think he's a better, at this point, if you had to line up what Brock Purdy was as a college quarterback as a whole versus Rocco Becht, I think I take Rocco Becht. Now, a big difference in that game against Kansas State. Iowa State was horrendous on third down, but they were really good on fourth down. 3 of 3 on fourth down. Kansas State 1 of 4. A lot of that came back to play calling, and Iowa State's fairly new OC did a nice job of calling the right things at the right times on fourth down the stretch. Iowa State ended up pulling that game out 24-21. A couple of people to keep in mind, to kind of keep your eye on for Iowa State. A couple of their tight ends really good. Ben Bramer, not a new name. Gabe Burkle, both those guys heavily involved with the passing attack. In fact, you're likely to see most of Iowa State's targets, I would guess, at least over the middle, certainly, but most of Iowa State's targets as a whole in the passing game will likely be to those tight ends, really dangerous guys who can kind of do it all. And you could argue Iowa State, just as good as Iowa is this year in that department, they are typically really good. The last time we could say that, probably 2021, when they entered that game with Charlie Kohler and Chase Allen and those guys. Wide receivers, of course, they lose Jaden Higgins as a wideout. They lose Jalen Knoll, but Dominic Overby is a deep threat guy. Brett Eskildson, who was very under-recruited, caught a touchdown pass against Kansas State, had another big play against South Dakota, and then they got the Townsend kid. By the way, Tim Brando, people know how I feel about Tim Brando. Not my favorite play-by-play guy. It's funny, during that last game last week against South Dakota, he was quoted as calling Brett Eskildson Escullin. So it's not Escullin, it's Eskildson. He is a guy who can catch it deep over the top. Punt return is interesting. They got a 21 kid. They got a guy who's number 21, and that is Aiden Flora, who actually played in the same backfield as Brevin Dahl back at ADM a couple of years ago. So Brevin and he very close. He walked on at Iowa State, part of the 24 class. He's already playing, made a couple of big plays against South Dakota. He's got some speed. That will be a matchup just because of the number similarity, very similar stories with Weegan and Flora. I know Flora went straight to Iowa State. Weegan went the JUCO route, but both come in as walk-ons, both wearing number 21, both from Iowa, and we'll see what he can do. But Iowa's punt coverage needs to be solid on Saturday. Of course, the running back tandem of Hansen and Sama, very dangerous. We saw them kind of trade off by half against Kansas State, and Iowa State just didn't need to see as much from Sama and those guys against South Dakota, but they're very solid. They'll run Wildcat at times. They did that against South Dakota, where they have both of them in the backfield at the same time. So something to keep in mind, something to follow on Saturday. I mentioned Iowa State's tight ends. It's going to be a big day, important day for guys like Zach Lutmer, guys like Carson Shire, Jaden Harrell, Jackson Rexroth could be a big factor in this one. Iowa's safeties, Wampa and Intringer, certainly. And defensive line-wise, I think Iowa's got an opportunity to maybe make some headway here. I did see some chinks in the armor when going back and watching the condensed version of Iowa State, Kansas State. Saw some flaws there with the Iowa State guards, maybe more so on the right side of that offensive line. And I expect Kelvin Bell, Phil Parker, to run some stunts because that's what was working for Kansas State. They got home several times against the Cyclones, totaled 4 sacks against Iowa State over in Ireland, week 0. Now, the biggest improvement we always hear is from week 1 to week 2. For Iowa State, you could argue from week 0 to week 1 to week 2. So there is still some unknowns here. I tried to listen to Matt Campbell during his weekly press conference, and I'm not trying to rip on Matt Campbell, but I got nothing out of the press conference. If people think that Kirk is vanilla in press conferences, Matt Campbell is vanilla. I got nothing out of that press conference. Speaking of vanilla, did Iowa hold some back by just running the football against Albany those final 3 quarters? Some of that was, I think, probably a little bit of uncertainty with how Mark Gronowski was playing after that first quarter, but Iowa didn't need to throw the ball around the yard. If they have confidence with Mark and his ability to bounce back and be the guy they brought him in to be, that he was at South Dakota State, I could see that argument. I could jump on board to that argument that Iowa kept all its tricks in the bag, right? Whatever Tim Lester has to run against Iowa State, they will have those ready. Again, can Iowa knock off a couple of big plays on the ground? Certainly Mark Gronowski's got to be able to push the ball downfield at times. His ability to run and make plays when they're there. He did that against Albany quite well. Can Iowa defend the Iowa State tight ends? And finally, can Iowa's corners hold up? That's why they need those safeties and everyone else to do their jobs. Defensive line needs to put pressure on Becht because Iowa State's offensive line has proven that it's not always up to the task in protecting their guy. And certainly if he were to go down, you're not rooting for that to happen, but that is a factor. If you can't protect your quarterback, you risk injury. And he is a mobile guy who moves and certainly is at risk of injury that way. And I don't know what they have behind him. They got the Alex Mansky kid from Algona who played a little last week, but Becht is their most important player without question. So lots to talk about. I mean, we're not done. I'm going to have Coach Patterson on tomorrow. Stay tuned for that. We're going to talk more Iowa State as we approach the 11 a.m. kickoff on Fox. Big noon kickoff. I'll be there. If you're tailgating, hit me up. Let me know. Say hi. It'll be great to see everybody there in a sea of red in Jack Trice Stadium this Saturday in Ames.